Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a three. And in this particular video, I want to talk about 5 questions to ask yourself before starting a PhD in business. So, if you don't know, I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship. I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can because there were so many amazing people that helped me along the way to get my PhD. I wanted to give back to other people that maybe there's somebody else in the world that can use this kind of stuff. And it's all the sort of things I've learned along the way. And in this video, what I'm going to do is get into 5 questions you should probably ask yourself before starting a PhD. This is really important because there was really no resource before I started doing all these kind of things for people that were out there thinking about doing a PhD. And these questions are important for you to sort of process and sort of vet whether it's the right thing for you to do. Because there's so many other things that you can do, and a PhD is while it's really wonderful and fun and exciting, and it's a great career once you get into it. There is lots of things to think about going forward. So the first thing I want you to think about is there anything that you would like to investigate for 10 to 20 years going forward? And you have to be very excited about that thing. And now I know, so personally myself, my sort of trajectory and what I was interested in changed over time. And that is completely normal because you learn throughout the process. I was going in thinking that I wanted to do international business. And I studied that for a few years. I did that in my master's, and then I studied that for a few years. And then I realized I was more interested in sort of decision making and learning within organizations. So that perspective changes quite dramatically over time. However, I was still really interested in just sort of entrepreneurial small companies and things like that do drive me forward. In fact, that's why I'm creating this whole reciprocity thing, because I'm a big believer in sort of commerce and enterprise and stuff like that, or entrepreneurship. So that's it. So you have to think about what is it that you are willing to study for a long time so that you are going to be excited about that. And you really have to think about that. The other thing is so a second question for you to think about is, are you willing to devote yourself to become an academic? So a PhD, unlike a lot of other degrees, is not a professional degree. It is a professional degree in the sense that you're being trained to become a professor someplace, but not in the sense that like an MBA would get you to go out and you do consulting, or going out and doing, just different things that, businessy kind of things. It's not a business degree like you think it is. And I emphasize that strongly. So you're really going to become a researcher if you do a PhD in business administration. Now, the focus is on training people to become a researcher, but there are some people that will, maybe later on they'll sort of change their trajectories and change their career trajectories and what they're going to do. And that is somewhat normal, but if you're going to do a traditional sort of route, it is doing the research game and going and becoming a professor going forward. The third thing that you should be thinking about is, what analytical technique or what data, what sort of setting that is it that you're really excited about? So what can you actually dive into and get sort of a sense of, okay, I like this. So what do I mean by that is going in and thinking about, am I going to spend a lot of time interviewing executives, for example? Am I going to spend a lot of time going in and analyzing secondary data or analyzing sort of databases and things like that? Am I good at programming, right? So, building a website like this is probably a little bit kind of crazy, but, it's going to be helpful in the long run. So, but things like that, like questions of like, what is it that you're going to be excited about and interested in for the long run? And those are great questions for you to ask, right? So if you're interested in interviewing executives, which there's lots of people that do that, and they are very successful in that, then by all means, that would be a cool sort of thing to get into. And it's not to say that once you do a PhD, it's, you can't sort of switch back and forth, but you do tend to specialize a fair bit once you get good at something. So a third thing, and this is, I'm struck by it, but it still is really fun, But it's something that, I underestimated being, 24, 25, is that you have to spend a lot of time studying and thinking about something. And your whole life is dedicated to it, right? About this particular topic. And that's really what it means to become a full professor in in a business school or any sort of academic environment, is that you've dedicated your whole life to one particular or a small number of topics, and you know a fair bit about that, right? And you can sort of share that knowledge to other people. And so you have to be willing to get lost in your own thoughts and sort of not get overwhelmed by this process of getting lost in your own thoughts. That's a really important thing to think about. And that is going to motivate you towards sort of the fifth thing that you should think about or ask yourself is, am I motivated enough to go through the lows in academic careers? There are a lot of lows. You could talk to any professor, any academic, and they'll say that there truly are a lot of lows, because there's different stages that you go through, and sometimes you're really low and sometimes you're high, right? But a lot of times there's lots of lows because it's a lot of work and you don't see immediate returns for that. So and even when you're 75 years old, you're still working on something, so you're still readjusting your expectations for what yourself is. So if you can imagine, this is kind of decision making. This is what I would sort of teach in the classroom, is that you set an aspiration or an expectation of where you're going to be in the future. And then if you don't meet that aspiration or expectation in the future, then you have to readjust. And that readjustment is that sort of negative feelings that you might get. And because often our expectations, it's called the planning fallacy, our expectations are a lot sort of grander than what we can actually accomplish. And, that's just life, really. Once you've been doing this for a long time and you're sort of part of life. I was having a conversation with my mom the other day, and she was talking about this. She's 75 years old. And I probably shouldn't say that out loud. But anyway, she's a wonderful soul. And she was talking about how that's so much part of life, about how you are constantly sort of reevaluating yourself moving forward, and you are sort of dealing with these little bumps that happen along the way of like, okay, maybe that there's this crisis and then you deal with it, and then there's another crisis and you deal with it, and that's just kind of part of it. But it's probably more so in academic research, because it's explicit, right? So everybody sees what your progress is, and you see what your progress is going forward. And sometimes it doesn't work out the way that you think it's going to work out. And you have to be able to deal with that and push that forward. The way that you deal with that and push forward is by sort of going back to your own ideas that you're very excited about, and continue to keep moving forward with those particular ideas. So if those questions, you should probably sit down and think about them, even write them down. And you can go in the show notes and you can look at the questions, write them down and answer them, physically answer them. And on a piece of paper, you can put it in the comments in the video if you want to. And you really should be thinking about what you're doing going forward. These are really important questions, because it's going to help motivate you and understand where you should go next. Whether doing a PhD in business administration is for you, or doing a PhD at all is for you, and if it is, then that's fantastic, right? That is something that you should feel that's great. But then, if it isn't, there's so many other things that you can choose to do in this world that are wonderful, and that will give you the same sort of satisfaction. So I'm just laying it out there, right? So hopefully you enjoyed this video about 5 questions you should ask yourself about starting a PhD, particularly within business administration, but applies to all sort of PhDs. So with that, give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and do subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, take care. Bye.